interested in effects. We are not looking at the causes. The value of the naira to the dollar would have meant nothing if Nigerians were not crazy about the dollar. If the Nigerian economy was productive, heavily productive, and an export-oriented country. If Nigerian economy was not experiencing inflation, unemployment, interest rate hikes, flip-flop foreign exchange policies, and a lot of information asymmetry among the players in the industry. All right. So these are the issues here. So I am not particularly surprised that the naira is failing woefully against the dollar, because the economy itself is suffering under the weakness of the support system. Now look at all the economic fundamentals that are supposed to support the naira. Inflation, for instance, is one of the highest in the last decade, and it has wiped out over 50% of the current naira value. When the value of your local currency is wiped out in the domestic economy, it reduces the overall value relative to other baskets of currencies in the world. All right. Now let's look at the level of our total reserves of foreign currency. Now, the reason why countries keep reserve of foreign currency is so that they can shore up the supply of the foreign currency relative to the domestic currency when there is a crisis. Nigeria's reserve has dwindled in the last decade to just barely about $30 to $40 billion. For a country like Nigeria that is import oriented, we have to have gotten at least $1 trillion in our foreign exchange reserves. There is a reason why the federal government has kept that amount low, because Nigerians do not have any capacity to generate lots of dollars. I'll give you other countries. China and other countries have trillions of dollars in their arsenal to protect their currency against the US dollar. Any developed country plans for the rainy day. So what they do, they find a way to generate foreign dollars. And how do you generate that foreign dollars? You diversify your economy away from oil. Okay, oil is still contributing about 90% of our foreign exchange earnings. That is totally a misnomer. The problem with that is that Nigeria is exposed to the international market, exposed to the international oil market, and so the rises and falling of the dollar of the oil market affects our foreign exchange savings. And so we do not have any other foreign exchange earner. So what happened to exporting computers? What happened to exporting agricultural products? What happened to exporting cars? What happened to exporting high level services? What happened to exporting shipping? What happened to exporting tourism? Where do we generate money from? How can a country like as big as Nigeria, 210 million people, be exporting only one product? That is why we do not have foreign exchange savings. As I speak to you right now, it is just hovering between $25 billion and $14 billion. The size of our capital market itself is just about $650 billion. That's the entire size of the capital market. Now, what Nigeria should have done is to have diversified over the last 30 years to ensure that we can earn trillions of dollars and save it in our foreign exchange account, such that when problems like this come, we shore up the value of the naira by simply supplying more dollars to the market, and then the price will go down. That's number two. Another reason that has been ignored over the years is the fact that Nigerians like cosmetic approaches to solving problems. Dealing with the central bank, dealing with the foreign exchange market, the bureau de change, you are dealing with the essential, the smaller parts of the problem. The problem is rooted in the weakness of the economy itself. So what is the productive capacity of Nigeria? The GDP of Nigeria has ranged between 300 billion to 500 billion in the last 10 years. There is no sign that the economy is expanding according to productivity standards. All right. If the economy was expanding like what China did in the last 15 years, China was growing at the rate of 9% per annum, and that allowed China to be able to grow and move from a poor developed country to a medium developed country to an emerging giant. Now Nigeria has been growing at 3% for the last 10 years. The population of Nigeria has been expanding at 3.2%. It therefore means that for every growth in GDP, population wipes it out. We are having more children, we're having more demand. All right. So the economy is growing and regressing at the same time. We call that retrogressive growth. So we are not adding more productivity, we're not adding more output, but we're adding more population. So there's no, this is not good economics for our foreign exchange. So I don't like the argument of talking about foreign exchange, buying backlogs, regulating bureau de change, stopping bitcoins from trading. Those are the palliative, those are elemental parts of what determines the strength of the currency. The economy is weak. That's the bottom line. The economy cannot support a high value of the naira, because even you are a reporter, for instance, check the value of your naira in your pocket. You see that even within our economy itself, the value of the naira has dwindled in the last 1 year. So why do you expect the value of the dollar relative to the naira to remain stable? It's not going to remain stable. In fact, by all available predictions, we expect it to get worse until the government finds a way to diversify the economy and expand our productive capacity. That's the long-term solution. We are just going around circles trying to solve the problems at the smoke level. What about the fire level?
Okay, Queen is going to ask you a question shortly, but I just thought I should maybe expand this narrative a bit further. You mentioned a while ago the idea of diversifying the economy. I mean, Destiny, you and I have talked about economic issues for give or take 4 or 5 years, and we have had calls to discuss diversification. Experts like yourself always point to the problem of model. They say Nigeria has not decided on what model, all right, it wants to adopt in terms of economy, in terms of diversification. There are people who have argued that if Nigeria had diligently, consistently, and brilliantly invested monies from sales of crude oil, all right, that's in the last 3 decades, into other very critical sectors like tech and so on and so forth, maybe agriculture as well, will be a much better country today beyond Africa. But easier said than done. What are the factors we need to consider fundamentally for us to be able to achieve full-fledged, result-oriented diversification?
Yes, the problem is a multidimensional problem, so there are no easy solutions to these problems. But from available information, we have what are called competitive advantages in production. Nigeria has a competitive advantage in producing agricultural products. We have a very fertile ground. We have a lot of natural resources. We have human resources, and then we have a history, a 1,000-year history of farming technologies, because our forefathers were farmers. So it is good business if federal government diversify by heavily investing in agriculture. On the other hand, too, Nigeria has a population of about 65 million young people. That is a powerhouse to invest in. So we should invest heavily on agriculture, especially export-oriented agriculture, and then heavily on the youth population. And the youth population is in the tech generation. The 2 biggest earners in the world currently are tech and manufacturing. We had the opportunity to grow our manufacturing, but we lost all of that in the 80s and 90s when we did our indigenization policy and allowed Nigerians to take over companies founded by Europeans. What happened is that because these people have not developed competencies in running solid, hard-level systems, they failed. All the manufacturing dried up by the 2000s. We don't have solid manufacturing going on in this country. And as I speak to you right now, in the last 3 years alone, 15 companies have indicated interest to leave this country. 10 have already left. Others are still writing they want to leave. The economy is weak. It doesn't support manufacturing as we know it, because manufacturing firms are going around the world looking for places where they'll have cheap manufacturing, they have production systems, they have a local engineering industry, they have technical competence, and then they have a robust production system. That's why they are going to China, Asia, Taiwan, and other places. Those people have highly educated people. They have a very solid production base, a standard local engineering industry, and others. So they have competitive advantages in that area. They spent the last 40 years investing in such things. Nigeria totally failed and allowed that era to pass. We cannot catch back to the past, but we can reinvent the future. We can use what we call the Indian model. The Indians were great at manufacturing, but they discovered early on in the 70s that tech is going to rule the world. And so they sent millions of Indians, nothing less than 40 million Indians, arrived in the United States United States and the developed world between 1960 and 2000. 40 million Indians ran through the world. And what were they going to study? Tech, coding, analytics, things like that. It is not surprising that this is 2024. The big tech companies in the world have Indians as their bosses. These little guys have grown to become men, and then they control billions of dollars. In fact, the most highest earning income group in the US, non-indigenous group in the US, are the Indians. They even earn more than the Americans because tech is easier to ship to the rest of the world. It is easier to ship a microchip than to ship a trailer load of cars, and a microchip can earn more than cars. So tech is the new oil. So the model Nigeria can catch on. Nigerians are actually one of the most intelligent people in the world. The statistics support it in every country. In America, they are the highest educated immigrant group. Nigerians are great when it comes to things that involve using the mind. Nigerians are great as doctors, they are great as nurses, they are great as technological experts. So the federal government should set it up as a blueprint in the next 10 years. Put out funds, train 20 million Nigerians on high-tech skills. The benefit of that is that we will have software engineers, artificial intelligence experts, machine learning experts. We have coding experts. We have people who are working in the cloud, cybersecurity. These are the areas that will generate billions of dollars for the economy in the next 10 years. The federal government should take it as a major policy to invest in at least 10 million or 20 million Nigerians to have hardcore tech skills so that Nigerians can compete with their contemporaries all over the world. The benefit of that is that we do not need investment in real production systems. We just simply need the human component. Most of the infrastructure around the tech has been internationalized. We have the clouds, we have data centers scattered all over the world. From your home now, you can sit down with your laptop and generate millions of dollars without putting any capital investment up front. So the federal government is a win opportunity for Nigeria for us to invest in tech, to capture the 65 million youths that we have that are roaming the streets without skills. And then we need to invest in agriculture because we are a growing population country. We need to feed ourselves and feed the world. So Nigeria has an advantage in agriculture and has an advantage in tech. So we can ignore the manufacturing middle and invest in agriculture and tech. We are not alone in that calculation. Singapore did that without agriculture. China did that without focusing on agriculture. They used to be heavy producers of agriculture, but in the recent years, they migrated straight to manufacturing.
Well said.
Okay.
Well said.
Yeah.
So, while we hope that the federal government will put in effort into diversification, I mean, in terms of agriculture, tech, and all of these areas that you have mentioned, particularly as a coping mechanism for individuals and businesses, let's look at how, so while we wait and hope that they look into these areas, for individuals and businesses, how do we now begin to mitigate the adverse effects of this free fall of the Naira? And then in the long term, what are the implications of the free fall of the Naira on the Nigerian economy?
Okay, for the small business, there are two ways to approach this subject. Inflation erodes the value of the currency, and so currently there's a high cost of doing business in Nigeria. Most of those high costs are localized within infrastructure, setting up power systems, and setting up basic brick and mortar businesses. The small businesses can take advantage of the information technology by trying to find a way to reduce their capital cost and tap into the powers of technology. For instance, I'll give you an example. I run a school in Benin City, and I'm making investments to try to expand my online presence. The advantage of online investment is that I can have a classroom online that can take 10,000 people at once, but there's no physical infrastructure I will have to invest in that will take 10,000 students in my class without spending millions of naira, but I can achieve that in tech. So all businesses should find a way to introduce tech and improve their operational efficiencies. That is in the short run. Improve operational efficiencies, trying to reduce their total cost of total cash outlay and reduce their dependence on rigid systems. We need to find a way to integrate into tech. That's number one. Number two, all businesses should find a way to earn dollars. All right, because let's put it this way, we operate in a global marketplace, and then if the dollar value is increasing against the naira, what common sense tells us is that any Nigerian should be at least having two accounts now, a dollar account and a naira account. So what they gain from us in the value, we gain it back by being productive. In other words, businesses should be export oriented, it should be foreign oriented. And I'm glad a lot of Nigerian youths now are making the effort. They are earning serious dollars from IT, from the international world. What that means is that what they lose in the naira, they get in the dollar. For instance, if I have a business, one localized in Nigeria, one that is oriented towards the dollar market, what happens is that if I lose my currency in the naira value, then I earn dollars. For example, the people that are complaining now about the naira value are those people who heavily depend on the naira alone, and so they need to do something buying products from abroad. But if you are a dollar earner, you are smiling to the back as I speak to you right now. So in the interim, we have to be looking at a dualized economy. We have to look at the economy from two perspectives: the Nigeria domestic currency and the international currency available to everyone. So people need to upgrade their skills from basic brick and mortar businesses to information technology businesses. So for an average small businessman, all you need to do is to find a way to, how do I earn these dollars? How do I list on foreign exchanges? How do I earn more dollars? I am doing that as a businessman, and I know that I have my situation has improved in the last 1 year because I'm trying to earn foreign dollars. I'm upgrading my skills. I'm going for programs. I'm learning things on how to find a way to localize my business within the internet space, such that I can earn most of these dollars that are losing, that we are losing value to. So when you earn the dollars, you transfer it to naira, and then you have more money. So that's how businesses can cope to mitigate it in the interim. I mean, at a micro level.
You talked about tech a
And
while ago, just before Queen, just before we circle back to Queen, you talked about tech, and it sounds beautiful every time you talk about that. In fact, I've intentionally followed the Minister of Digital Economy and Communications too, talking about Dr. Bosun Tijani and all of the great plans that he has, and he has said some of them will actually start paying off, not now, but maybe some 2, 3, 4 years time, which also makes sense because he said we're always looking for quick fixes, which doesn't always cut it in the final analysis. But let's talk about whether or not we are ready for tech. Yes, we have seen a handful of hubs, tech hubs across this country, particularly when you go to places like Lagos. Perhaps we have a few in Abuja as well. However, the question is, are we systematic about it? Are we strategic about it? Or is it just a dispersal of young, creative, innovative, resourceful people who are trying to make ends meet and then trying to make a difference within the space? Do we have a systemic approach to it? Do we have an institutional thinking that backs this kind of goal?
no, we don't. The technology minister is an individual, and then we have so many, about 48 ministries in this country. We don't need to be hearing it from the technology minister. We need to be hearing it from the president of this country. All right. You know why? Because it's a pebble game. The minister has ambitious plans for Nigeria, but he's not the CNC. He's not the chief person. He doesn't determine the budget. What we should be asking is, what is the agenda of the government with respect to tech? Now, you are right when you said many Nigerians on their micro level are trying to obtain these skills. But what we should be seeing is government pushing these skills, not at the micro level. There's no systematic plan to upgrade our total technological dependence. For instance, every year in the world, we have what we call data centers. How many data centers do we have in this country localized? An individual cannot create a data center, for instance. Only the federal government can muscle that might. Then countries are having what we call satellites in space to increase their geopositioning technology. Nigeria had 2 satellites in space. One of them got lost, and then the other one, we've not had a lot of signals from it for some years. And what is the federal government doing to take advantage of the race of space? We are still connected to GPS technology located elsewhere. Nigeria should be investing billions of dollars in taking advantage of our internet space, data centers, data warehouses, and finding a way to set up bandwidth technology, fiber optic technology. We should be seeing cables all around this country. We should be seeing big $billion going into investing in tech, so that these things will complement what the millions of young Nigerians are doing. This should not be coming from talk and rhetoric from the minister. It should be coming from the presidency itself. All governors, all presidents, all universities, even education has to be patterned in a way to focus on technology. How many Nigerian universities post technological skills. Apart from these private universities that are making it private initiatives now, if you go to any Nigerian university, how many universities can offer the courses like cybersecurity, software engineering, data science? What is the effort from the top to make sure that there's a national policy in the next 10 years to democratize technology such that government is investing in the infrastructure, the schools are investing in setting up the knowledge systems, and then the banks are financing tech-oriented businesses? It has to be a compound approach, not a random unilateral approach from one minister out of 48 ministries. Go and check the budget. How much has been put on technological education and expansion? What is the investment in technological infrastructure in this country in relation to other infrastructure? That is how you know whether there is a systemic approach to it. As I speak to you now, with my knowledge, the government is giving paltry sums to these industries because the government does not believe. The government has to have a vision of what it wants, right? We have to have a long-term vision and include people into that vision and sell it far and wide, such that the whole country will have a consciousness. That's what they are doing in Dubai right now. As I speak to you, in Dubai, they are investing heavily in 2030. It is operational tech, from secondary schools to primary schools to university to every aspect of society. There's a blueprint. They are working to make everything green and tech by 2030. What are such ambitions in Nigeria? Who is thinking for this country? Who is planning for this country? What are the strategic think tanks driving this economy? I'm afraid none.
Okay, there's something else that probably also leaves most Nigerians afraid, which is the issue of, again, like you said a while ago, diversifying the economy. Every time we talk about that destiny, it is agriculture that readily comes to mind. As of today, that is another front of the economy that is heavily challenged, from insecurity to fraud in the process, paucity of funds for smallholder farmers, in some cases, absence of inputs, essential inputs for farmers. And then how do we scale? And then you talk about regulation. And then you talk about export of this produce. Because in the end, we've seen how many times Nigerian products have been turned down in Europe and America because they fall below the minimum requirements or the minimum standards. How do we scale our agriculture? I mean, when people talk about the Netherlands, for example, how that just from one line of product, Netherlands is making much more money than what we realize in agriculture as an entire country. Yet they say Netherlands is not bigger than a state like Niger, for example. So how do we scale in real terms with regards to agriculture?
Yes, our approach to agriculture is redundant. Let's start from there. When we talk about agriculture, I'll give you a statistic. In the US, less than 4% of the population are engaged in agriculture. And yet they feed the whole of North America. So that's the statistic. Less than 4% of the population are engaged in agriculture. And yet that 4% feed the whole of North America. The entire North America depends on agricultural production in the United States. All right. Now, what we are doing in Nigeria is the opposite. Over 65% of the population of Nigeria is engaged in agriculture. And yet they cannot even feed, the country cannot feed itself. The missing middle is what we call scaling. It's what we call corporations, all right? We are using the smallholder method. Nigerians are using agriculture to solve unemployment problem. What agriculture only generates more money when it is scaled. It is about productivity. It's not about employment. We are using the employment model. What we should be using is the productivity model, tractors. We need to have billion-dollar investments in farms. We need to find a way to drive people into, educated people into setting up farming systems. For example, just imagine if Aliko Dangote, for instance, has a big farm, and then all the billionaires in Nigeria, the politicians are investing heavily in farms, and then invite educated people to run these farms using big tractor systems. So you see that because they are corporations, they will be able to achieve more. We call it leveraging systems. You are going to produce more, and because they are companies, they can be regulated easily because they are not many. And then they can have the capital to invest in quality standards. Now, how do you control 60 million farmers who are having small rickety subsistence farms, and then you want them to produce standards that will be determined from the United States or Canada or Europe? They don't have the technology, they don't have the resources, they don't have the skills to produce products that are world standard. But if billionaires go into agriculture and the government has an investment policy on agriculture, Don't leave it to small farmer holders. We need to take a business approach to agriculture, get out of the employment model and move into the productivity model. We need to be checking what is the volume of output from the agriculture industry. That can only be guaranteed by heavy investment in technological oriented farming, tractor farming, cash crop farming, big dollar investments, not small farms we have in the north scattered all over the country. So that's the first missing middle. We are not approaching using the big model. We're using the small tiny models. It's just pebbles. It doesn't work. The second approach to agriculture is that Nigerians have not come to appreciate agriculture as a business. To us, it's still a lifestyle. It's not yet a business. Agriculture has what we call a value chain. The value chain of agriculture moves from the primary production to the secondary production to the tertiary production. Now, Nigerians are very great at producing primary products. I'll give you an example. While Nigeria is great in producing cow meat, for instance, we are not very great in producing leather. And leather is a processed cow meat. So you can see we are not very great at that. We are great at producing tomatoes, for instance, but we are not very great at producing tomato paste, the one that is organized. The processing aspects of Nigeria has a missing middle. There's no linkage effect between the primary agriculture, basic agriculture, and the secondary agriculture, for instance. Okay, sugar cane produces sugar. So if you produce sugar cane in the modern world and you are not able to convert it to sugar, you are simply shortchanging yourself, because by the time you sell it to the secondary producer who converts it to sugar, he will sell it back to you as a full-time product, and then you pay 6 times the amount. So like I said, our growth model is immiserizing. We invest heavily on primary agriculture. What about the secondary aspects of agriculture? So there's a value chain. There are about 7 levels of agriculture before it gets to you, before you get to that thing. So Nigerians are very great in producing cassava, great in producing cashew, great in producing cocoa, but we're not very great in producing bonvita. We're not very great in producing products that depend on cassava, like cassava petrol, ethanol, and things like that. That's the business angle of agriculture. That whole middle is missing, and it is costing us billions of dollars, because we are not approaching agriculture from the big corporate angle. We're approaching it from the small, seismic, tiny kiosk mentality. So it doesn't work. The model is we need big shifts, we need big decision makers, we need big policies to shift billions of dollars of funds to agriculture industry and shrink the population of people involved in it, and take that population and shift them to tech, because tech, it uses people, but agriculture uses more resources and tractors. But for you to gain money for agriculture, because it's very cheap compared to the entire value chain, you need to invest massively. You do scaling. When you scale, you make tiny amounts of money per unit, but on a scale it becomes very large. So how many of our farmers are rich enough to generate $5 billion in revenue, for instance? None. So we are simply impoverishing more people by using the palliative approach. We call it palliative approach to this thing. We are trying to just give people money. These people, corruption takes it. You send money to the ministry sends it to 5,000 farmers, and these farmers are connected to them maybe through some connections. And then these farmers, instead of investing it in farm, they need to pay their children's school fees. What's happening is that we are not solving the problem on a big angle. So that's not what it means. Our model is very basic, redundant, regressive, and does not deal with the big problems that we face.
Well, we're going to wrap up now, Destiny, but just on a final note, what do we do to fix our manufacturing? I say fix, I use that word advisedly, because manufacturing in Nigeria today, unless, of course, we want to lie to ourselves or live in denial, is broken. So what do we do to raise our game on that front?
Yes, currently manufacturing does not contribute more than 2% to Nigeria's export earnings. That's already abysmally low. Like I told you, we don't have a lot of advantage in that area. For manufacturing to take off, there need to be advancement in the local engineering industry. We need technical expertise, something we don't have in this country. All right? We need 2 things. One, a strong economic base. We need a local fabrication and engineering industry that is world-class. We need an expert, technical-oriented staff. It takes 15 to 20 years to develop all that. We may have lost it in that front. What we need to just simply do is to take each product at a time. Let's give an example. Nigerians cannot produce cars at scale like the way we produce other products. But we can say, okay, let us look at tires, for instance. We can look at the tires of these big cars and start producing tires. Nigeria can be known as a tire giant. Nigeria can say, okay, we don't want to produce cars, we want to produce only brakes. So we can take the brake system, operate what we call franchise systems. You can use a standard car, and you can imagine how to create its brakes. It takes about 650 jobs to make a car. We cannot be thinking about the whole car because we don't have the infrastructure to support production of the entire car. But we can take small aspects: car seats, car belts, car brakes, car parts of an engine, for instance, we can just focus on one part of the engine, model it after a standard product, and then Nigeria can be the biggest producer of tires, the biggest producers of gearboxes, the biggest producer of so we should stop thinking about the car, the whole. We should be looking at this a part of the whole. We can take advantage in a part of the whole, given our weak economy. But to be looking at the whole, we may have lost that because we don't have manufacturing is a set of associated industries. We do not have the support industries to support full-fledged manufacturing. So we can start from with the micro angle by focusing on small aspects of production units where we can take advantage. The government can spearhead that. If we start producing those small aspects, with time in the next 10, 15 years, those small aspects can grow together and begin to create big manufacturing products.
Well said, Destiny. Queen and I were grateful to you for the time you spent with us on Global Morning today.
Thank you for having me.
We're taking a quick break, everyone. When we return, we'll have join us on the program someone who is a pundit when it comes to the agri sector. Do stay with us.